Welcome back to another edition of the Green Room Podcast. Of course, here I am, your host slash producer, Andrew Kent, along with both of my co-hosts, Mark DiGiovanni and Otto Keisker. Gentlemen, you know, not the craziest week for sports, but it really always seems like there's something going on in the sports world. And to kick off today's show, as we are going to eventually dive into the wide receiver position, and of course, we're only 23 days now away from the 2022 NFL Draft. The Eagles and the Saints just made a trade the other day. Big trade. This is good and bad for both teams, I think, but I want to hear both of your thoughts on the trade. Let's start off with Otto. What are your thoughts on the Eagles trade with the Saints?
Howie Roseman doing it again. I don't know why anyone ever doubts the guy. He's just pulling strings behind the scenes, a mad scientist. No, seriously, Howie won this trade. Just to be 100% realistic. I got it yesterday as an Eagles fan, and I know there were a lot of picks that went back and forth when you see the Schefter tweet. So it took me a second to comprehend exactly what was going on, which may speak to my lack of intelligence. But once I actually understood what was going on there, honestly, this is a steal. I was really starting to think that the Eagles weren't going to be able to flip one of these picks for a first next year, which I think everybody wanted in Philadelphia as an insurance policy in case Jalen Hurts isn't the guy with so many talented quarterbacks coming out next year. But even more than that, Joe Banner had a tweet yesterday, and he really put it into perspective for me just how much of a heist this was. We've seen some major talent move around the NFL this year, right? And draft picks have gone with those trades for that major talent. The Eagles essentially, for a first round pick yesterday, throw out the 6th and the 7th rounder. For one first round pick, they got a 3rd this year, a 1st next year, and a 2nd the year after. At one in each round, right? That is what it takes to get Devontae Adams. That is what it takes to get Tyreek Hill. That is what it takes to get all of the rest of the major stars in the NFL that don't play the quarterback position. And Howie Roseman got it for a mid-round pick that you don't even know what you're going to be able to do with. So, Howie, I know you've screwed up a good amount lately, but seriously, he did a great job with this one. He set the Eagles up for the future in a loaded class next year. And, as a Birds fan, couldn't be more excited about this.
Your thoughts, Mark?
Yeah, Andrew, you said there's not much going on in the sports world today, but Tiger Woods is officially back. It's Masters week. Let's go. Thursday, 10:34 Eastern. Let's go. I'm excited to watch. But yeah, I love the Eagles trade. Like Otto said, you move it back to 2023. You have 2 picks next year. There's a certain quarterback down there in Titletown, Alabama, number 9. Hey, if Jalen Hurts doesn't work out, now you got ammunition to either trade up and go get that guy, or if Hurts is your guy, worst case scenario, you trade Hurts and maybe a pick for another quarterback. Look at over the past 2 years, we've seen Matt Stafford go from Detroit to LA, Matt Ryan going from Atlanta. I know it wasn't a big trade, but Atlanta to Indianapolis. You see Carson Wentz going from Indianapolis. There's a lot of quarterback movement. Russell Wilson moving to Denver. So, if you want to go get like a top guy, like Otto said, look at Tyreek Hill and Devontae Adams, massive haul. So the Eagles are doing smart things. So now they have a lot of ammo. Do they go after a veteran quarterback? Do they go after a big name receiver? Do they trade up in the draft next year? Endless possibilities, I think.
Yeah. If I could just jump on, Mark mentioned Alabama. And one of the things that that I didn't even realize, I wasn't thinking yesterday, because obviously all of our heads are quarterback, and thinking about the Saints too. You're now thinking quarterback for them. What if they package these picks and move up for someone, or do they think the guy they like may be in that middle first round range? But I saw one today that, said, hey, What about for the Eagles? Looking at this is like, obviously if Jalen Hurts doesn't work out, you bundle those and you go get a quarterback next year. But let's say Jalen Hurts plays phenomenal, and then you bundle them and you go up to like 3 or 4 because the quarterbacks are going to be at the top of the draft to other teams, and you go get Will Anderson from Alabama, right? Another difference maker, primetime player. So, next year's class is just loaded. To load up on those picks makes so much sense. And the Saints, I think that team is entering a rebuilding phase. So giving up future first round picks to me just didn't make sense. But you know what? It all comes down to who you actually pick. So we'll see.
Yeah, and just a quick point on the Saints too. I don't know what they're gonna do with these 2 first round picks, but I know they are in salary cap hell right now. So it's gonna be interesting to see what Mickey Loomis does. Does he go after 2 guys here to save some space and possibly win now with Jameis Winston? Or does he package these 2 picks to move up and go get a Malik Willis or Kenny Pickett?
What do you think, Otto? I mean, what are the odds that could actually transpire, what Mark just said?
I think it's pretty realistic. I mean, whether or not you trust Jameis, I forget whether or not it's a 1-year or 2-year deal they brought him back on. That doesn't tell me you think he's your quarterback of the future, and you just converted Taysom Hill, and then you bring in Andy Dalton. So who do you have that's the long-term guy? You gave up your first rounder next year. You gave up a second rounder the year after. Like, being able to trade up and get that guy in later drafts is going to be really hard. So now's the time where you have that ammunition to make that pick. So I think it's really realistic. We've seen teams do this before where it was a 2-trade, move up to get a quarterback. They traded to acquire a second pick, and then they bundled those 2 picks to move to the top of the draft. So I think it's very realistic. That's actually the next thing that I'm waiting to happen now that the chips have kind of fallen here.
And just to clarify, boys, based off what Mark said and how I was talking earlier about how the sports world there hasn't been too much going on in the sports world this past week. Well, the Kansas Jayhawks did win the national championship Monday night, but that's exactly what I mean by nothing happened this past week. Just nothing at all. Nobody cares about the Kansas Jayhawks and their stupid national championship. The only thing that's good about it is that the Big 12 has back-to-back winners of the NCAA championship.
You should be happy. This makes your conference look better.
Only thing that I'm happy about, or will ever be happy about, is if West Virginia wins the conference for once, which they never have, or if they somehow miraculously win the NCAA tournament before I die, which I highly doubt will ever happen, along with the Temple Owls. It's just pathetic. But to continue with this wide receiver talk, though, boys, Mark, I know you had touched on it too with the Tyreek trade as well as Devontae Adams. Who do you guys think could be the next big receiver to get traded? Could it be Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, AJ Brown? Who is next? Mark, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's just nuts, the receiver movement, because I don't think anyone saw Devontae Adams leaving Green Bay or Tyreek Hill leaving Kansas City. But here we are. Devontae's a Raider. Tyreek's a Dolphin. It's nuts what just happened overnight, it seems like. But if I were to say there was a guy who's going to be next, I would have to say DK Metcalf, because Seattle's in a rebuilding mode and they can get a lot of draft capital back for him. So that would be my pick. I don't think San Francisco is going to trade Deebo, and I don't think Tennessee is going to get rid of AJ Brown just yet, just because they're contending teams.
Do you have a wide receiver of your own, Otto? Same thoughts, or do you have a different feeling?
Yeah, if I had to pick one of the 3 there, DK would be my guy as well. I totally agree with Mark's point. Just a rebuilding team. Deebo is an interesting one in that conversation, just because the Niners did such a good job of hitting on draft picks during that time that all of their contracts will come up at the same time and they'll have to pay them all. So it could put him on the market, but let's be honest, they don't have an offense without him. So and they're in win now mode, so I don't see them getting rid of him, to Mark's point. And then AJ Brown, similar storyline. You already got rid of Julio. I love Derrick Henry, but we've talked about the shelf life of running backs. AJ Brown is, the guy to me that is going to make that offense run for the future. So I don't see him getting rid of him. And they're in contention as well. So it comes down to the team in rebuilding mode, and that's Seattle.
We kind of touched on the market price for receivers. So I would like to do the position deep dive now for the wide receiver position. So as we do every single week, and we start with the overall strength of this position in the draft. So guys, how would you rate the wide receiver position in this draft, and where does it rank compared to the other positions this year? Mark, what are your thoughts?
I wish we could have like a top 15 list for receivers, because I think 5 is too short, because there's a lot of guys I could have put in my top 5 who arguably could be a top 5 receiver in this class. So I think this class is an A+ across the board. I think it's probably, if not the strongest position, one of the top 3 strongest positions in this year's draft. It is insane the amount of talent coming out this season.
Otto, would you also give it an A+? And what teams do you think are in the market right now for wide receiver? Who needs a wide receiver the most in this draft?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be one of those really tough graders and just give it an A. Leave the plus out of there. But this really is just a stack position in this year's class. And it seems like that's the way that it's moving. We've now seen a lot of drafts as of late that have really strong receiver position. You wonder if that's because of the spread offenses that have taken over the college game and are starting to take over the NFL game as well. As far as teams that are in need, Atlanta is one, obviously, with Calvin Ridley being out. There have been a lot of receivers mocked to them lately, and I'm not going to say some names because that might give away my top 5. Kansas City and Green Bay are the 2 obvious ones, given the trades that have happened recently. Both have 2 first-round picks. We discussed that last week. And then the other one to me that not a lot of people are talking about, but they were involved in the Devontae Parker extravaganza, or whatever you want to call it. And they didn't get him. And they interviewed Chris Olave today, actually, the Dallas Cowboys, after losing Amari Cooper and Wilson to the Dolphins. They're definitely one that's in the market here. And as we know, Jerry likes to have a big passing offense that doesn't dominate the clock and loses games in the playoffs. So they're one in the market.
So, Mark, who's a player that you think the Eagles should necessarily go after? I mean, we could touch on this now, but probably best to say that for a little bit later. So, you know what? Forget about it, because the Eagles probably aren't going to even draft a wide receiver, knowing Howie Roseman just needs to get an entire defense there. So let's just go right into both of you guys' top 5 rankings at this position. And as we did a couple weeks ago, let's go back to the format where we had 5 to 2, and then the other person does 5 to 2, and then both of you reveal your number ones. This week, I'm hoping you guys have some differences. Maybe Mark has a player that Otto has in maybe 15th place, and Mark has that guy number 2 or 1. That would be amazing. We'll see what happens. So who wants to kick it off this week with their number 5 through number 2?
I think I kicked it off last week. So Mark, I think it's yours.
All right, I'll take the reins here. So am I going 5 through 2?
Yes.
All right, cool. All right, so like I said earlier, I think I could have done like a top 10 list. I'm probably gonna get some hate online just because of who I have at 5. But number 5, I kind of went on my rankings on who I've seen the most, and that's what I basically did. So number 5 for me, the hometown kid from Penn State, Jahan Dodson, absolute beast at Happy Valley this season. Only had 2 drops. He was one of their most reliable receivers in all of college football. On 93 attempts, only dropped 2 balls, had 91 catches this year. Insane. And then, just watching him this year, I think he had a weak quarterback in Sean Clifford. There'd be moments, especially in the Illinois game this year, where Clifford was just throwing that ball in the triple coverage, and you can just see be like, where's he throwing that? And then Jahan Dodson would act like he's Superman, go up and just moss everybody. And it's just amazing his ability at 5'11", great route runner, put him inside or outside. He was just such a dynamic playmaker for James Franklin's offense last season. Number 4 for me, this was tough because I hate this team with a burning passion. I have Chris Olave from Ohio State. This dude literally breaks my heart year in and year out for 4 straight years at Ohio State. He is so fluid in his route running. His hips are so clean. His footwork is phenomenal. And then his burst after the catch is unlike any other. I can't tell you how many times I've heard Gus Johnson literally scream Chris Olave because he's outrunning the entire defense. It looks like he's a Lamborghini and everyone else is just like a Honda Civic out there. It's unbelievable. Number 3 for me, I have Drake London. And a lot of people have London as the top guy. I didn't really get to see him as much, but I have him here because of his physical tools. I mean, 6'5", 210. That is a big boy going up there and making catches. Kind of similar to like an Alshon Jeffrey type player where he doesn't have blazing speed, but he is going to moss everybody in his path. An absolute red zone threat. Kind of reminded me of like a little bit of like a Randy Moss, Calvin Johnson type player. Really liked him a lot, had over 1,000 yards. And he led the nation with 19 contested catches this season. So, like I said, big catch radius, nice hands, big body receiver. Did suffer a broken ankle this season, which was a shame. So he missed majority of the season. I think it's a little bit of a concern, but we'll see where he goes. I think he's going to be a first-round pick. And number 2 for me, this guy's probably like, I'm going to draft him in fantasy. It's my guy, Trelon Burks from Arkansas. I love watching this kid play. He's 6'3", 225 pounds, another big boy. He was a huge part of that Arkansas Razorback offense. Him and KJ Jefferson, I wish they were playing together next year. It's a shame that Treylon's coming out this year, but yeah, they were such a fun offense to watch this year. They were just putting up incredible numbers, and he literally looks like DK Metcalf running down the field. What I noticed is he's just got a quick first step, and I noticed a lot too in film. They didn't just use him as a receiver; they kind of used him in like a Deebo Samuel type role. This is why I have him so high, because he was like a hybrid player. He would come in on jet motions and run the jet motion, or he would take a handoff from KJ, and they would do like cool little plays like that. So I think he's very interchangeable like Deebo, and I think he's just got crazy ability, and had over 1,100 yards with 11 touchdowns. Kid was a beast.
So Otto, any reaction to Mark's 5 through 2? Do you agree, disagree? Is it terrible? Is it great? What are your thoughts?
I think we had a lot of similarities in there, which you'll see in a second. I now know that he has at least one of my top 5 guys outside of his top 5. So we'll have that conversation maybe after he tells me which one, when he announces number 1. And Trelon Burks for me, I mean, I'll just go out and say it. He's number 6 on my board. So he's got him a lot higher than me. But to Mark's point, I knocked him partially because of the way that he was used. Mark bumped him up his board because of the way he was used. You can look at it either way. Coaches are going to look at that differently. It wouldn't surprise me if he makes his way in the, probably 20 to 30 range, because a coach, can and will use him in the way that they used him at Arkansas. Like Mark's talking about, to me, I was looking more, really put a high emphasis on route running ability. And in the way that they used him at Arkansas, he didn't have to run the full route tree. He didn't necessarily play a true receiver role and run, 10-yard outs, post curl routes, things like that. It was a lot more RPO. So that would be my big one at a Mark's top 4 or 5 through 2. But I will jump to mine and we'll see how they line up. So number 5 for me, same as Mark at number 5, Jahan Dodson, Penn State. Mark talked about the reliable hands, the good route running. Couldn't agree more. The the first note that I had was the really good hands. And the ability to go up and get the ball, like Mark talked about, is really impressive. I mean, the guy's got ups for somebody at 5'11", the catch radius, and then the ability to haul him in even when the ball's on his fingertips really stood out. Those strong hands at the catch point, quick in and out of breaks, which makes sense for a little bit of a smaller receiver. Didn't run the fastest 40 at the combine. I was a little bit shocked at his time. Thought he'd be faster at a 4.43, but good in and out of breaks. So he gets the separation when running routes. He's a good blocker, which I know nobody wants to hear about, but in today's NFL with bubble screens and tunnel screens, not only do you have to be able to be a receiver who can catch one and make people miss, which Dodson can do, but you also have to be, a willing teammate to jump in and put your head down and block for people. And he does that really, really well. Like I just said, as far as breaking tackles and things, just dynamic with the ball in his hands, returned punts as well at Penn State. So you're getting a guy who can do a lot for your team. And then, play inside and out. I love that. The versatility at the next level. Really like Jahan Dotson. Don't know if he'll be early second or end of the first. But I have him at number 5. And my biggest knock on him was, the inability at times to get off of press coverage, which will need to be worked on at the next level. Number 4 for me is Jameson Williams from Alabama. And just to note, when I go through these, I'm rating my players as though they, are not injured. I'm not talking about where you pick them necessarily. I'm talking about my rankings. So Williams may, go lower because of his injury or higher, but I don't take the injury into consideration here. Elite speed, as everyone knows who watched Alabama this year, and we all did because of how far they go each year. Get the ball in this guy's hands and good luck. He's not the strongest through contact, but it's tough to get your hands on him when he's got the ball in his hands. Pretty solid route runner. There are times when it's sloppy routes, but he does get away with it with the speed after the break. So, if you can kind of fine tune that at the next level, then you've really got something. Uses head fakes at the top of the route, which I absolutely love and he's effective with. Justin Jefferson does this really well as one of the best route runners in the NFL. Jameson Williams does that, and corners have a tendency to look at heads versus hips, which is the wrong thing to do. And if you catch them doing that and you get them with a head fake, your hips are going the other way and you're gone, right? The stop and go acceleration on double moves is unguardable. Really good, strong hands for this guy as well, going up and catching the ball. He makes some contested catches. You're like, wow, you think of him as a speed guy, but he can go up and get it. And the strong hands at the catch point, it really stood out to me in the tape that I watched. Not the best blocker, though, and it sometimes even looked unwilling. And then the other thing, again, I talked about it with Trelon Burks, Jameson Williams didn't have to run the full route tree at Alabama. Mechie ran more of the route tree than Williams did, just due to the fact that you can just tell Williams to run straight and he runs by everybody. So that's a knock for me. You want to know he can do that to be effective at the next level. But this guy, I mean, if he's in the late 20s, it's a steal for whoever gets him. And I think Green Bay and Kansas City are just praying that he falls there. Number 3 for me, Chris Olave. And Mark talked about him already. And I talked about him as a crush on an earlier episode. I love this guy. The smooth in and out of routes. I call him Chris Suave Olave. He's fantastic. He can run the whole route tree. Everything is fluent. Mark talked about his feet. It's fantastic. He's got that stop and go move where off the whistle, he kind of doesn't do much. He maybe, like toe taps almost, and then he goes. And just like Justin Jefferson does, again, to bring him up, that is so effective. And then to have the burst that Olave has, I mean, it's fantastic. He's unguardable one-on-one. And my only knock on him is that at times he lets the ball get into his body when he's catching it, instead of being a true hands catcher. But he's great on sideline catches. He goes up and gets the ball when he needs to. He's a willing blocker, and just the ability to run the whole route tree and make it look incredibly fluent. This guy is going to be a nightmare at the next level. And I know, Sven, you talked about skipping over which receiver we wanted the Eagles to draft, but I'll tell you right now, I think he's the guy that fits for the Birds, because my top two guys I think will be gone. And this guy gives us the ability to stretch the field and not let people stack the box against the run game. And that just opens up the offense. And then the other perk is that Dallas is interested in him, so we just take him before they got him. And then number 2 receiver, sticking with Ohio State, Garrett Wilson. Really, really like Garrett Wilson. Just an all-around really good receiver, the best route runner in the class. Him and Olave on the same team were a nightmare at Ohio State. He does a great job of subtly throwing extra breaks into his route. So what I mean by that is when you're a corner and you see a receiver break the first time, that's when you flip your hips and you break on the route. But if it's a double break route, whether or not it's a true double move or if it's a double break route, that's really hard to defend because you flip your hips in one direction and then flip your hips again in the second direction. So Wilson does that. When he runs his out route, he kind of flips his hips a little bit and then he flips his hips again. He gets that corner to flip too early and start to break in the wrong direction. And he does it really well. It comes really natural to him. So that's something that's really, really hard to defend. And I love that he has that. He's really quick in and out of his breaks. The feet aren't Olave feet, but they're pretty darn close. Again, he uses the head fakes well. He seems to have all the little pieces of route running really down well, and have the full route tree, which I love. Really good straight line speed, ran as fast as Olave in the 40 with a 4.38. Good hands, couple drops, but good hands for the most part. Strong hands at the catch point. Really good finding the soft spot in zone. Good with the ball in his hands, willing blocker, and he's tough to bring down in the open field. So that's Garrett Wilson for me in 5 through 2.
So just so our viewers have the full breakdown and can see the full list of your guys' receivers ranked 5 through 2, can you just repeat them? So Mark, who is your 5 through 2 again?
Number 5 is Dodson, 4 Olave, 3 London, 2 Burks.
And for Otto, 5 through 2?
5 is Dodson, 4 is Jameson Williams, 3 Chris Suave Olave, and 2 Garrett Wilson.
So I want to ask Mark, what do you think about Otto's list not having Trelon Burks in the top 5? You have him at number 2.
Yeah, I mean, I watched a lot of Treylon Burks this year just because I watch a lot of SEC football. My sister goes to Alabama, so I like to usually stay up top on the SEC, and that's typically where the best recruits are. So I've seen Burks a lot this year, so I probably have a little bit of like a favoritism towards him than most people just because I've watched them play pretty much all year. So I think a lot of people, I know Pro Football Focus has him like at 7 or 8 best receiver, but I mean, I'm just going to give my favoritism towards him just because I've seen him play. But yeah, I'm ashamed Otto put 2 Ohio State guys in his top 5. But, I mean, what are you going to do? They were really good this year, and I hate to say it. And then not to mention Ohio State has Jackson Smith, Najinka, and then they have Marvin Harrison Jr. this year. So it's just going to be a lot of fun watching those guys again. And then I probably already could tell Otto's number 1 is. You could probably tell already who my number 1 is, but I like Otto's list a lot. I think his list is pretty solid.
So before we get to our final rankings at number 1 for Mark and Otto, though, Mark has a quick story to tell about Penn State wide receiver Jahan Dodson.
Yeah, friend of the show, Mike Morris, who we went to school with. Actually, was telling me he used to run track with Jahan Dodson, and now they follow each other on Instagram. So kind of cool, local kid, local story. I think Mike played football against Saquon Barkley too, so it's pretty cool. Like you got to compete with 2 guys who are going to be professional athletes. I don't know. I think that's pretty cool.
So now we know that Mike Morris not only gets roasted in fantasy sports like the NCAA tournament bracket or fantasy football or basketball, but also in real life sports like track.
I would love to see like the old highlights of like Mike Morris and Jahan Dodson. That would be funny.
Hilarious. Mike Morris actually beat him. That'd be crazy. Actually, speaking of which, I saw that it was like the ESPN video or whatever showing, I think it was from Sunday Night Football this year. It was showing Tyreek Hill in high school, his time in track, his running time in track and field on the 200 versus Usain Bolt in the Olympics. And he was keeping up with all the really fast guys, which is extremely impressive for Tyreek.
Yeah, it's nuts. And I think it's going to be fun to watch him in Miami. The way, we saw Deebo Samuel be used. It's going to be crazy to see how Mike McDaniel, coming from that San Francisco system, uses Tyreek in Miami. And that's going to be a fun team to watch. And not to mention, they got Jalen Watt, who's also like another insanely fast wide receiver. So a lot of speed down there in Miami, a lot of speed.
Oh, yeah. Now, I definitely have a few questions about the Dolphins offense and the Raiders offense this year with Devontae to ask you guys after we get through these top picks. So let's just do that right now. Mark, who is your number one wide receiver for this year's draft?
Yeah, my number one guy, I actually got to see him up close in person this year when I got to see him play, and that is Jameson Williams. I know Otto's got him at 4, but Jameson's my top guy. He was a great player for Alabama. He was Bryce Young's favorite target. And whenever Alabama needed a big play, they were throwing it to number one. It didn't matter if he was in double coverage, single coverage, even triple coverage. That guy was beating the coverage on every single play. I really liked his ability. Like Otto alluded to, his yards after the catch. When he gets out in the open field, you can't take him down. It's literally like watching Tyreek Hill on the college level. We'll see how he translates to the NFL level, but incredible speed. Can run a little bit better routes. I think he can work on his footsteps and some footwork there. But I think the biggest thing is how healthy is his knee. We all saw national championship game, ACL tear on one of the first plays of the game. So I think that's like a couple of questions I have is, will that be an effect on his draft stock? How healthy is his knee? Same thing with Drake London too. How's that ankle? So I think that's a concern, but I think out of all these guys, I have Jameson ahead of the rest just because I got to see him up close in person when I saw Alabama play LSU this year, and he was just absolutely incredible.
All right, and Otto, who is your number one wide receiver for this year's class?
Yeah, Mark just mentioned him, and it's not Jameson Williams because I have him at 4. Drake London, my number one receiver. It's pretty rare that you see this combination of size and speed, which is why he's my number one guy. I really like all of the receivers that I just mentioned, and even some of the guys outside the top 5 in this year's class, but this breed of size and speed doesn't come along. Mike Williams is a great receiver in the NFL right now with size, doesn't have speed. Mike Evans, another one, doesn't have speed. Alshon Jeffrey was one, right? Megatron was a different breed. And I'm not saying Drake London's Megatron, but when you turn on the film and you see a guy who's 6'4" and turns a 50-50 into literally a 90-10, but then gets the ball in his hand and is juking people out, making people miss, and getting off the ball quickly, and is tough to even get your hands on and press coverage. It's something to be reckoned with. I love this guy with that combination. The quickness off the line, like I talked about, is huge. Quick feet, and he gives the head fakes in the routes, which I've already talked about. Really good blocker, gets his hand underneath people's pads, even for a guy that big. So you got to love that. And then one of the things that he does really well, and it's easier for bigger receivers or tight ends to do, but it is an art. Subtle push-offs. Trelon Burks does it a little bit, actually, which is another bigger receiver. But when I think about it, I think of Gronk. He's gotten away with it his whole career. And it's the ability to be able to slightly extend your arm, not extend it fully because that's when the ref sees and throws the flag, but use the momentum that you have as a bigger guy, put your body into someone, and then slightly extend your arm and give them that little bit of a shove to send them in the wrong direction before you make that cut and come back to the ball. And Drake London does a great job at this. Breaks in before breaking in and out of routes, and then before going up in the air for jump balls. There is an art to the jump ball. There is an art to running routes. And some of it are these little things that are technically illegal, but there's a way to get away with them. And this is an art that very few people have mastered. And Drake London seems to have it when you watch his game. Great body control on the sidelines. Great body control when going up for the ball in the air, plays well through contact in the air. So strong through that contact, which he looks a little slender in his body makeup, but he plays through contact really well. And then one of the other things that I absolutely love about this guy is when he makes a break, whether or not that's an out route or when he gets behind you or when he comes back to the ball out of his break, when that corner is on his back hip, he boxes out with it. He continues to keep his ass backwards, keep you on that back hip so you can't get your arm out front, and then allow himself to extend his hands because he knows with the length that he has, if he keeps you on that back hip, you may be able to get an arm out front, but you're not going to be able to reach farther than his hands are, and then he fully extends to grab that football. And it's quite literally unguardable when he does that because of his length. So there's just a lot of subtleties to his game that I really love, along with the size and speed that this guy has mastered. Good hands as well. Big hands, strong hands for a bigger guy. And I guess my one knock on him would be, some of his routes could be a little bit crisper, but if you can find me a 6'4" guy who runs, routes like Chris Olave, then I'll stop doing this podcast and you can take my spot. But as a whole, just really, really like Drake London. I continue to see him like in the top 15 taken. I think he's going to be a really big impact player at the next level. And I know he's got a pro day coming up here soon. Hoping he's healthy and he can run a 40 time just to show off that speed along with the size. And then once he does that, send in the card. This guy's a top 10 pick in my mind.
Mark, any thoughts on Otto's number one? I mean, do you disagree? What are your thoughts on him, placing him above Trelon Burks, your boy?
Yeah. Like I said, I think a lot of people are knocking Burks, but I have favoritism towards him because I watched him all year, and I think he's played against better competition. I know Drake London played at USC. I mean, that program's been down for a little bit, and the Pac-12 is kind of trash right now. So maybe it bounces back. But I didn't get to see a lot of Drake London just because of the injury. I've heard about him early in the year and saw a little bit of his stuff, but I mean, it's just hard to watch the Pac-12 on the East Coast because all those games are either on at midnight or, they're on, at, 12 Pacific. That's 3 Eastern here. And that's, a big afternoon game here. You're not really paying attention to the West Coast. Didn't really get to see him up close and personal. Like I said, I made my list of the guys who I've seen up close and personal, or if I watched a lot. And yeah, I did see a little bit of Drake London. That's why I'm not high on him as some other guys. But if we had like a top 10 list, I think Otto and I can go on and on. So I think this receiver class is so deep. And I wrote down even a couple sleepers too, who were just outside of my top 5.
Yeah, and let's talk about some wide receiver sleepers. Who is, in your mind, the biggest sleeper in this position? Mark, why don't you just go ahead since you just mentioned it?
Yeah, this one guy from a small school, but Skye Moore. And this guy literally lights up the sky. He lights up the scoreboard like it's the 4th of July. He was the number 1 ranked wide receiver according to Pro Football Focus this year. He's only 5'10", 195, about that range, but I mean, you just watch him. He's a joystick. I mean, the guy is everywhere. His route running is as clean as Chris Olave. And I mean, when you watch him one-on-one, I mean, you're not beating you. You can't defend it. Like, he is just uncoverable one-on-one. You turn on the tape. I know it's FBS, it's 1AA, whatever. I mean, I don't care. Like the guy's literally like running around people like it's like he's like playing against kids. Like it's unbelievable. Unbelievable catch radius too. I mean, this guy is diving all over the field, making catches, and that's what I love about him for such a small guy. And then he's got absolute bunnies on his feet. I mean, he goes up and mosses people for a little dude. It's really impressive. Just go on YouTube and watch Skye Moore. There's a reason that this guy's coming up. And obviously, Western Michigan has some history. They had Corey Davis was the first round pick a couple years ago. And I mean, Skye Moore may not be a first round pick, but he's going to be an early day 2 pick.
And then Otto?
Yeah. To Mark's point, breaking down these receivers and, there's so many good ones that I not only had my receiver sleeper, but my actual sleeper was going to be a receiver as well. And his name was Skye Moore. So I guess I'll have to find another guy before we do that segment here in 2 minutes. But there is so much talent here. I love Skye Moore. Speaking of up close and personal, Mark, we were at the draft when Corey Davis was picked. But my receiver sleeper is another guy from an FCS school. It's Christian Watson from North Dakota State. And I will be 100% honest. I saw this guy's name, a month ago now. And he's rising up people's boards and they're like, oh my God, the size and speed again. And I was just like, North Dakota State, absolutely not. I'm not even going to turn on the tape. And I finally did it this week, breaking down the position, trying to be fair to everybody. And this kid's got some tools that are going to translate. You turn on the tape and he's just constantly flying by absolutely everyone, which you could say is because he's playing FCS talent. But he ran a 4.3 640 and he's 6'4", just like Drake London. So again, the combination of size and speed is just off the charts. He doesn't look as big as Drake London when he plays, and he doesn't weigh as much. So that's probably a part of it. He's not as much of a 50-50 ball guy, more of a take the top off the defense guy. But oh my gosh, really good route runner for a guy who's in the FCS. So, the speed and the ability to run solid routes is why he's constantly behind the defense. Pretty darn good hands, really good blocker. And they even used him as a running back at times at North Dakota State, similar to Trelon Burks. So you like the versatility there, as Mark's already talked about. He's okay with the ball in his hands after the catch. He's not breaking too many tackles, but it is tough to get his hands on him with the speed. So it's going to be interesting with this guy. I think he's got a lot of good tools. Some of it needs refinement. And, the biggest step for him is just going to be catching up to the game speed of the NFL coming from an FCS school.
Nato, I know you kind of touched on it earlier. Why don't we just talk about it, even though I was very in the mood to not talk about the Eagles taking a wide receiver since we just took one last year. But so who did you say earlier again, Otto, that you think would fit best with the Eagles from the wide receiver position?
Yeah, Chris Olave is who I had. I think you can make a lot of arguments if you're talking about the Eagles receiver position. You could say they need a slot guy specifically. You could say Quez is an outside guy, and they need someone to replace Rager. I would be fine with that. You could say they need a deep threat to stretch the field. If you don't think Quez necessarily is that guy and open up the run game, I'd be fine with that. Or you could say they need a big guy because, again, Quez and Devontae, neither one is necessarily that big red zone threat. But I kind of, from what I've seen with mock drafts, Wilson and Drake London seem to be going before the Birds. So then I get into those next couple picks. Not sure they want to take Jameson Williams, just not sure about the ankle with the first round pick there. And then Chris Olave to me is just, Jalen Hurts has struggled at times, but he can hit an open receiver. So I think you want to take the guy who can run the whole route tree, which is Chris Olave to me. And then, as I talked about, to me, what is most important for this offense right now is being able to stretch the defense and not allow them to stack the box against this great run game that the Eagles have put together. So Chris Olave would do that, and then that opens up, not only the run game, but Dallas Goedert underneath and Devontae Smith on the outside. So he's my guy for the Birds.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I don't think the Eagles take a receiver in the first round. So I think a guy for me who I really like them to take, I have a few names, but I really like John Mechie for him. I think another guy at Alabama, he's 6 foot, 195. He's the type of guy who can go up, who will go up and, attack the ball, really good catch radius, and he can stretch the defense too. So he gives you the best of both worlds. And once again, another guy who got hurt at the end of the year. I think he got hurt in the Cincinnati game. So that's why I think he's slipping down draft boards. I think the Eagles can get him, day 2 or day 3. I think that'd be a great pick. And that way you can focus, your 2 first rounders and your second round pick on defense. And then, go grab Mechie in the 3rd or 4th round would be a huge deal to me.
And that would probably mark the first time that Howie picked a good wide receiver outside of the top 10 to 15, because every single receiver he's picked besides that has been literally the most atrocious player I've ever seen in my entire life. So let's hope that they do pick Mechie or whomever it may be, that they're a lot better than the crap we've seen on the field the last decade. Thanks to Chip Kelly too. Let's not forget about him, or even Andy Reid. So guys, I actually have a little fun segment we can do here real quick before we move into our final few segments. I just threw it together the last few minutes, but I want to do a little bit of a rapid fire and ask you guys 4 different questions about the current players in the NFL. The first one is about who you guys think will excel better in their new offense, as well as who will have the better second year, who is more likely to rebound this year, and then who is more likely to drop off between these 2 wide receivers. So let's start off with the first question. Who do you guys think is more likely to have an electric year under their new offense this year? Devontae Adams with the Raiders or Tyreek Hill with the Dolphins? Let's start with Otto.
I'm going to take Tyreek Hill. I think Mike McDaniel's is coming out of an offense that knows how to use a guy with a versatile skill set. We saw the usage of Deebo Samuel. Tyreek Hill also can't draw double coverage every play because of Jalen Waddle. The Raiders, all they have is Devontae, and Josh McDaniel doesn't know how to make a receiver look good because he's a meathead.
Mark?
I'll say Devontae just to be different. I think the Raiders have a lot of different weapons in Vegas. They got Darren Waller. Hey, don't forget about my man, 3rd Renfro. Great fantasy pickup. I knew he was going to be the best receiver out of that class. Absolute beast. I think that Raider offense can be really fun to watch. I think Derek Carr, he's arguably a top 10 quarterback. And now he's got his best friend, his roommate from Fresno State. Look out for those Vegas Raiders. The only thing holding them back is Josh McDaniels. Remember, he had a great quarterback in Tim Tebow and absolutely ruined the kids. So there's Josh McDaniels there for you in a nutshell.
The Raiders, man, they really have had a lot of problems in the last year. So let's hope that Devontae Adams, he'll bring his presence there, his glorious presence, and maybe a Super Bowl for once. But let's not beat around the bush here, because if anything, Devontae Adams is going to carry this offense. We all know that Derek Carr is not going to do that. All right. Who do you guys think is going to have the better second year out of these receivers? Devontae Smith or Amon-Ra St. Brown? Mark, who do you think?
That's such a good.
Throwing you on the spot here, my man.
I'll say.
Come on, this is rapid fire.
Yeah,
I'll say St. Brown, just because he doesn't really have anyone really to compete with. I think they have a weapon with him. I read all the reports coming in the camp that he was their number 1 guy as a rookie last year, and him and Goff seem to have a really nice connection. So I'll say St. Brown.
Bro, you underestimated my man Khalif Raymond. You forget about him. He's trash. Otto, who do you have?
Right there. Devontae Smith. No, I'm going to take the First of all, you talk connection, Goff and Brown. I'm going to take the connection dates back to the college days. Devontae really seemed to find his footing at the back end of the year. So I think it's just going to take off from there. I think he's got a higher ceiling as a player. We've heard about how Nick Sirianni wants to get the ball in his playmakers' hands more, and that's Devontae Smith.
Yeah, you really can't bet against your own team, but at the same time, I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, so I'll take him too. I agree with Mark. All right, who do you guys think is more likely to rebound this year with their new team? Amari Cooper with the Browns. Don't forget about his connection with Deshaun Watson. It could be electric. Or Allen Robinson with the Rams. Who do you think, Otto?
I'm going to take Allen Robinson. And I'm not going to base it off anything factual. I'm going to base it off the fact that I don't like Amari Cooper. And I think that Deshaun Watson getting the most guaranteed money in an NFL contract ever while having 22 civil suits against him is disgusting. So I don't care about the talent aspect. I'm rooting for Allen Robinson in this case.
All right. And Mark?
Completely agree, Otto. The fact that Deshaun Watson is making that much money is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
It's just a shame that he's even allowed to play football. I mean, let's be honest, that guy should not even be allowed back in the league. I mean, I don't want to get into it because it'll just get me angry, but I'm gonna go with Allen Robinson too. I've never liked Amari Cooper. I always thought he was lazy in college. He was lazy in the NFL when he came up with the Raiders, and he was just lazy in Dallas. I mean, he was the luckiest wide receiver. I'll never forget in 2018 when Rasul Douglas made a perfect play and somehow that ball just lands right into that guy's lap. That guy is terrible. He's trash. He's garbage. And he's always hurt too, so he's never reliable. Give me Allen Robinson. We are Penn State.
But if Amari Cooper was an Eagle the last 5 years, you would have been like, oh, my God, he's the best wide receiver in the entire country. What are you talking about?
Well, he wasn't, so he stinks.
There's a let me just put this way. There's a reason why the Raiders let him go. I'll put it to you that way. And there's a reason why Dallas let him go. There's two teams that let him go.
I think if Dak Prescott was healthy all of 2020, he would have been a top 5 to 10 receiver that year. That's just my thought. All right. Well, let's not get more into the Dallas Cowboys and their garbage. Let's talk about this final question here of the rapid fire round. Who do you guys think is more likely to drop off this year? Since these guys are getting towards the end of their primes, Stephon Diggs on the Bills or Keenan Allen over in LA at the Chargers? Mark, you go ahead.
Woo, that's a good one. I'm gonna and they both have really good quarterbacks. I'll say Keenan because Keenan's pushing 30. Diggs has got a couple more years till he's at 30, but I'll say Keenan because Father Time's kind of on him pretty quick.
All right, and Otto?
I'm going to go with Diggs because Dable just left for the Giants, and I'm just not sure of how good the offensive coordinator is going to be coming in to replace him. So I'll go with Diggs.
Sweet. All right. Well, we got to do more of these rapid fire rounds because I really enjoy them. All right. Let's get into the final few segments as we do every single week. We'll talk about both of your sleepers. It could be any general player at any position. So, Otto, why don't you tell us one sleeper you have this week?
Yeah, so I'm going to try to find a guy in here that we haven't already talked about because Mark already stole my sleeper in Skye Moore. So, number 6 receiver, Trelon Burks. Nope. Christian Watson already talked about. John Mechie talked about. I got a couple more in here, but I'm going to pick Alec Pierce. From Cincinnati, another receiver here, 6'3", 210, another big-bodied guy. Again, ran a good 40 for a big guy, 4.41. He was the main target for Cincinnati. As Mark knows, without Alec Pierce, there would be no Desmond Ridder. He gets off the line really well, gets off press well. Again, good quickness for a big man. He's a pretty good route runner. I really like him against zone coverage. He has a good understanding. Him and Ritter seem to be on the same page against zone, of recognizing where the zones were, and then finding that soft spot. And then once he gets into that soft spot, he presents his numbers back to Ritter, and he comes back to the football and keeps that defensive back on his back hip, like I talked about with Drake London, and extends those long arms. Good hands, as a catcher, and good blocker as well. So really like Alec Pierce is a sleeper in here. I think he's probably in the second round, and he's going to be a steal for one of these teams, probably be a little bit higher if this year's class wasn't so loaded.
What about you, Mark?
Yeah, I actually will step away from the receiver position. My sleeper here is Christian Harris, from linebacker from Alabama. I can't tell you how many times I texted you. All these guys, I just sent clips of Christian Harris is blowing up people. I absolutely love watching this kid play. Probably one of the heaviest hitters we've seen in college football. He won the Dick Butkus Award for the nation's best linebacker, and probably played the game of his life against Georgia in the national championship. We'll see how he translates to the NFL level, but Saban and Belichick kind of come from that similar defensive background. So, multiple linebacker schemes and 3-4 defenses and stuff like that. So I think he'll translate well in the next level. So Christian Harris has been my guy all year, and I'll keep rolling with him.
All right. And what about your guys' draft crush of the week? Mark, we'll go back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Marvin Leo, and he was a beast at A&M on the defensive line, and I saw his name going as a first-round, top 20 draft pick, and of recent, I guess I want to say like the last couple of months, he's been coming up as an early second, middle round second pick, like kind of like in that range. But, I mean, this guy's got incredible talent, great quickness off the football, had a great year for the Texas A&M Aggies, and yeah, I would say he's definitely my crush. And I don't know why he's slipping a little bit, but I think he's got a first round talent. I think somebody, if they're going to pick him up in the second round, is going to have a nice little steal, and he'll be really nice to solidify your defensive line.
All righty, Otto, to round it out, who is your draft crush of the week?
Yeah, my draft crush, same position as Mark's. Guy doing a little bit of a different trajectory right now. So as Mark talked about with Leo, initially a lot of mocks had him in the first. He's starting to fall into the early second, which I think is, first of all, wrong. You get that guy in the second round, he's a steal. Completely agree with Mark on the talent there. Had him as my number 2 defensive tackle in our episode a couple weeks ago. But a guy that's actually ascending up the board at the defensive tackle position is another guy I talked about a couple weeks ago in Logan Hall from Houston. Really, really athletic defensive tackle, just like Marvin Leo. Great first step. But what I love here is the array of pass rush moves that this guy has. He does fantastic work with his hands. He has a rip move, a swim move, and then he has a bull rush. Every single play, this guy seems to be in the backfield against the pass. Whether or not he's just blowing linemen into the quarterback's lap, or, actually getting a free rush after winning on a swim move. The guy really is a nightmare. And then, you can speak to it with the bull rush, but at 6'6", 285, he holds his ground real well and plays great in the run game as well. So this guy's starting to move up the board. You're starting to see him in the beginning of the second round, same area as Marvin Leo. I like both of these guys, but I really like the array of pass rush moves that Logan Hall has. And, interested to see where he ends up at the next level.
Okay, well, final segment of the day, boys. We'll wrap the wide receiver position there. I'm sure we'll talk about it more once we get very close to the draft and we have more of our friends and family on to discuss the Eagles and what they'll do and where all these wide receivers will land. But let's finish off this week with a little story. David Ojabo, he is an edge rusher that tore his Achilles at Pro Day. Apparently he was supposed to be drafted in the top 3, now is injured. Who knows if he'll even play next year? Probably not. But if you're a team and you really need an edge rusher, like your defense has been so bad the last couple of seasons, where, if you're a team, would you draft him? Do you think he's still a first round pick, a second round pick, or do you think he goes maybe third or fourth round? Let's go to Mark right now.
Yeah, I mean, that's just such a shame. I mean, you think about, all the hard work you put in to be a first round draft pick and literally just a snap. And now it's like, wow, you may not even get drafted. Like, it's just so sad. Such an incredible talent. I think he's going to go in the 5th round. I think that would be a great place for him because I think a team, you'll have him under team control for 4 years. And it's a guy who probably had a first round grade on, and you get him in the 5th round. I mean, it just stinks. Like, this reminds me of Sidney Jones tearing his Achilles at his pro day.
What are your thoughts, Otto?
If David Ojabo makes it to the 5th round, I will literally buy you. I won't buy you a beer. I'll buy you the whole bar. Mark. There's no chance. David Ojabo, to me, to Sven's point, is what top 3 edge rusher in this year's class. I already talked about him as a crush in an earlier episode. I think that this guy has the ability to be the best pass rushing defensive end in this year's entire class. To me, there's 2 things that could keep him from getting outside of the 1st round, and that's Kansas City and Green Bay having extra picks. Both of them are teams with 2 first-round picks. They can use the extra one on him. They want to be contenders for a long time. They don't care if he misses a year here. And you get a premium piece. Green Bay just gave up Zadarius Smith, and the Chiefs have had trouble getting to the quarterback. If he makes it outside the 1st round, all bets are off. There are going to be a million teams that are calling to get to the top of the 2nd round to get David Ojabo if he makes it there. There is a rule in the NFL, and a lot of people don't realize this, and I didn't know it until Sidney Jones, who Mark just referenced. If you have an injury and you end up sitting out the entire 1st year of your rookie deal, and you were drafted outside of the 1st round, your team gets a 5th-year option on you. The same way they get a 5th-year option for a 1st-round pick. So if this guy makes it to the 2nd round with the talent that he has, every team in the league should be calling to get to pick number 33 and go get this guy, because you still get 4 years with him. He misses a year and you still get 4 years with him. I mean, it's a no-brainer to me. The only thing, again, stopping that is some of those teams at the back end of the 1st grabbing him. But for the talent that this guy has, if you can go and grab him, like give up your later 2nd round pick and then some later picks, make your 1st round pick and then move up to the top of the 2nd and get this guy, you get 2 prime talents in this year's draft, and you move out, and both of them you get 5-year contracts on. I mean, it's an absolute steal to me. I'm not going to be shocked if a team does it, because to me, it's an absolute no-brainer to move up to the top of the 2nd round and grab this guy. There's just too much talent, and that rule of allowing the 5th year if he misses a whole season, it just makes it too easy to me.
And to reiterate what Mark was saying, Sidney Jones, oh man, that guy was terrible. So let's hope the same is not the case for David Ojabo, because you just hate to see a player get hurt, especially one that's supposed to be drafted as high as they are with all their talent. So we'll see what happens come draft day, but we'll end it right there. Next week, we'll be discussing inside linebacker and outside linebacker. A lot of fun still have to be had on this podcast before the 2022 NFL draft. Thank you all so much for listening this week. Of course, I am your co-host, Andrew Kent / producer, along here with my co-hosts, Marty Giovanni and Otto Keisker. We will see you once again next week. Thank you for listening to the Green Room Podcast.